Dermot Kennedy joins me now to talk about it. How are you?
What's up? How's it going?
Not too bad, not too bad. I want to play you the song. Take a listen to this.
I knew from the start you'd be the one to set me free. That day in the park when the herd would hide from me. Those eyes used to know me, it's been way too long. You are the moon and the stars and all they gaze upon. Time won't ever move slowly, what you waiting on? Yeah, what you waiting on?
That is Dermot Kennedy and Giants. So a couple of things I want to talk about here. What I find really interesting about this pandemic time and the music or this time of great unrest and the music that's coming out on it is that it is well suited for the moment, even though it was written long before the moment. And quite often, and I hear you had a similar experience with this song.
Of course, yeah. And I mean, you definitely have to be careful currently, right? Like you don't want to bring out something that seems super ignorant or dismissive of anything. You don't, but at the same time, releasing music and creating music is my job, and that's what I'm passionate about. So if you sort of hide away in times like this, I don't think that's great either. So it's about finding the right song. And this one, obviously, I wrote it a long time ago, but it didn't make my debut album, and I always it was always in the back of my mind that I felt like it was going to be important, and now just felt like a perfect time for it, honestly.
Well, tell me what you wrote it about initially. What was the initial inspiration for it?
I think initially what it was for me, and something that I write about so often, and something that I just sort of find myself writing about quite often in my music is I basically, the idea of this song is sort of accepting change, and despite how difficult it might be, and moving forward with hope and optimism. And what's changed, I guess, is when I wrote it initially, I applied that idea to my own life. And now I'm in a position where I can release the song, and I hope it can apply to where we're at in the world, that certain changes need to be made and certain things need to change. It just felt good to bring that idea into the world, honestly, especially considering the song, like, I felt like it sounded hopeful, but it also didn't sound like an upbeat sort of like song that seemed ignorant of what was going on, you know?
Yeah, I mean, hope and optimism is hard to come by these days for a lot of reasons. You know, it can be uncynicism can be a hard thing to access, or even to be comfortable putting out there, you know?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, yeah, so I see that as kind of my responsibility, my small place in the world. This is what I can do. And if I've got a fan base that want to hear what music I make, if I can give them a certain amount of hope, I think that's a cool thing.
Well, the hope is also at the beginning. I watched the video, like the 360 video you did, and it starts off with this quote from the poet Leslie Dwight saying, "2020 isn't canceled, but rather the most important year of all of them." Tell me what that quote got you thinking about.
I thought her poem was a really nice mixture of being aware, but also being hopeful. Because like I've said now a bunch of times, I think the main thing you don't want to do when creating throughout this time is come across as ignorant or tone deaf or something. And I think if you reach straight for hope, that's a tricky thing to achieve, because it's just like there is crappy stuff happening, you know, like it's not all good. It's just not. And so, but also you don't want to sort of put a negative message out. So I thought hers was just a really good mixture of both of those things. It seemed like it had optimism for the future, but just that it was also acknowledging that this is a difficult year.
What feels different about writing music now? And I don't mean necessarily during the pandemic and during this time of hope, but I just mean after your debut does so well. What feels different about the actual creative process? Anything?
I feel a bit more confident.
Is that
for
so?
Sure. Definitely. Yeah. I think it's only natural. Like definitely at the start, I felt like I needed to prove myself, and I was kind of desperately trying to prove myself. And so I think I got in my own way sometimes, whereas now I feel like I'm somewhat established, and I think it's just, I feel quite confident, and it's a nice thing to know, to almost be like comfortable in the knowledge that I have a fan base and people who like what I do. So I should just do what I do and I should relax and get into that groove. And I'm getting closer to it all the time.
It's funny because it can go the other way, can't it? Like it can go to like things have gone so well. So, oh my God, now I got to put out something else, like that thing went so well. I mean, what else, like the pressure
True.
is on,
Yeah. And I'm a long way off. Like actually, I'm a long way off being done with album 2, like I'm in the beginning of that process. So I'm sure I'll go through all the emotions, but yeah, there could be a point because obviously I'm very determined for it not to just be like Without Fear Part 2. I don't want to just put out an album because I'm supposed to. I want it to be something very meaningful, and I want it to mean just as much to me as my first album did. And you don't have the benefit of sort of writing it for your whole life. Like the songs on my first album that I wrote when I was 16 and stuff. So I don't want to rush myself, but I also do want to do something special. Yeah.
I'm glad you brought up the songs on that album you wrote when you were 16. I wanted to talk a little bit about the early days of your career and take a listen to this if you can.
And I'm thinking about how people fall in love in mysterious ways. Maybe just the touch of a hand.
I'm Tom Power. You're listening to Q. Dermot Kennedy is my guest, and what you're hearing right now is a clip of him busking on the streets of Dublin in Ireland. And I mean, I know you were studying for a degree in classical music. You were studying like Orpheus and Eurydice, and then you found yourself busking. So I'm endlessly curious about the motivations and what busking gives you. So I'll start out with this. What drove you there in the first place?
Money. For sure. Desperately needed it. I needed it like same as anyone. I needed to make a living and I didn't have a career in music. And basically the first port of call was I needed to get into a studio. So I needed money for that. And that's why I went playing in the streets. And busking is so appealing because you pick your own schedule. You go whenever you want and whenever you need to. So it's not this thing of like you have to turn up every day. Like if you really don't want to one day, you don't have to be there. So it's all good. So I mean, there's definitely a bunch of drawbacks about busking, but there's some really good things too.
How long were you going for?
I probably went for the first time when I was 15. And then I'd say I busked for the last time when I was probably like 24, 25.
So like about 10 years straight of
No, not flat out, but like in and out,
And how long would you go for at a time? Would you go down there for 10 hours or 2 or 3 hours?
Oh God, no. So when I was like 15, 16, I'd found it's an art in itself. It really is. And there was days where I found myself like playing straight through for like 4 hours, and and the returns on that is terrible because you just become part of the street and people care way less. But if you can, I learned from an Australian guy who just gave me like limitless insight into the whole thing. He was like a pro busker and he was like, set your stuff up, take up as much space as you can, get the best equipment you can, get some artwork, stuff that literally like will get people to turn sideways and pay attention. And he just said, play like 40-minute sets. So I would play like 3 40-minute sets in a day and then go. Like it was a long way off what I wanted to be doing, honestly. And I found it quite difficult because like, I know it's kind of funny for me to say like, why did I go was because of money, but it really was. And so there was certain songs, say that Ed Sheeran song, like I knew people would stop if I played that song. And so I got to a point where I was making these kind of calculated decisions to play songs that weren't necessarily my favorite, but I knew I'd make more money and it was kind of gross. So I didn't love it, honestly, because you can't just play whatever you want.
But there's a couple of things on that. I'm interested when you start to recognize what songs work, even if they're not your favorite songs. But like even if when you start to recognize what songs work, I wonder if subconsciously that enters your songwriting because there are certain things that that you can do or one does, or you're able to study sort of the art of songwriting, pop songwriting that gets people's attention.
For sure, and I think. Maybe one thing it did do was it gave me more appreciation. See, I'm a huge fan of like Bon Iver and Ben Howard and those types of artists. And when I was busking, I realized, you've got these like huge hits and literally just these earworms that inevitably get people's attention. And so I think it gave me more appreciation for that and how some people are actually experts at that. But that's a whole different world. But it's a good point. Yeah, it shows you how some people can literally like craft songs that will get people's attention.
Bon Iver and Ben Howard are two artists that I associate with having success on their own terms and not being afraid to walk away from it when it doesn't feel comfortable to them. What do you take from them in that way?
I just feel like I'm so far off reaching a point where I want to walk away yet, you know?
Sure, I know what you mean, but like I think there's a way about. Sorry, not to interrupt you, but I think there's a.
No, of course. Yeah.
I didn't mean to say, hey, when are you giving it up? Come on now, hurry up.
No, totally, yeah.
What I meant was, I think there's like, I think within that there's a distance from the industry and a cynicism of the industry that's ultimately very healthy. You can learn from them.
For sure, and they have huge levels of success, right? Like I remember Bon Iver playing the Three Arena here in Dublin, and there was no posters up around town. There was no ads on the radio, but that place was rammed, and it was like there was so much respect for songs like Stacks and the quieter stuff. Like those arenas aren't quiet often, but they were for that, and so it's a really special thing. So I think Bon Iver has always been like number one for me in terms of artists who have achieved huge things without compromising at all. And yeah, I would agree. In those two acts, you can kind of see that they've had this huge success and then taken a step away from it, maybe because they just see it for what it is. But yeah, I'm like, honestly, I wouldn't lie about figuring out as I go. I absolutely am.
I can see you in the arena watching Bon Iver and going, that guy's singing exactly what he wants to sing, not necessarily meant for the radio. Everyone's incredibly quiet. I want some of that.
Totally. And for a long time, I idolized him completely. And for a long time, I literally wanted to have the exact same path, you know, like
go out into the woods,
bring out just bring out whatever you want. And just, it becomes hugely successful and all that. But I think their career path is like, not to sound negative, but I think it's literally impossible to follow. I think that's such a unique story and it's just like a magic thing. And I'm so glad it happened in musical history. I just think it's really, really a special thing.
I think your success and the early days of your success will also be talked about in a certain way that is sort of indicative of a certain moment in music history. And take a listen to this.
Tap my shoulder, hold my hand. Nights when nothing but dark, and there you could be my armor then. Island smiles and cardigans, the nights that we've been drinking, and we're here to help you kill all of this hurt that you've been harboring. Confession should be better planned.
That is Dermot Kennedy with An Evening I Will Not Forget, which is your first big song. You were unsigned, right? Like no machine, no label, no nothing. You literally just put the song up on Spotify, and it happened.
Yeah, it did, and it was such a beautiful time, you know. Like basically the reason I put 3 songs up one by one, and this is kind of like I did the busking, made a little bit of money, got in the studio, recorded 3 songs, and I had been through this experience so many times where I had spent all the money I had on making an EP or like making a mini album, and you go and you get the artwork and you do everything and go through the whole thing and send it around to labels and all that stuff. And I was just sick of not making any progress in that way. And it's a very deflating feeling to put all that effort and money into it and see nothing happen. And I had done that from like 16 years old to whatever it is, 24, 25. And so this time I was just like, I had these 3 songs that I was really, really proud of. And I had worked on every single line, like bass line, strings, piano, everything was mine. And I just got home and I went on to TuneCore and I put them up on Spotify and Apple and everything. And I just did it one by one because I figured like, I can't lose here, you know, like the world has it now. I haven't invested too much in it. I won't be heartbroken if nothing happens, but it exists and it's the beginning of this project. So, and then I went and played a show in London, and there was a few people there who spoke to me afterwards, and they said they'd come to the gig because they heard it on Spotify that day. And then I checked my plays, and they had gone from like a handful a day to a good few thousand, and it was just this thing where it spiked. So yeah, I took it from there, honestly. Like, if I had to pinpoint a moment where things kind of turned and I felt like I got a stroke of luck that I could chase, that was it, probably.
So I guess it brings me to the question of I don't want to say the wolves, because they're not, they're good people. When labels and managers and agents come to your door, what does the fact that you were able to have that success originally on your own terms do to the relationship you might have with that side of the industry?
Yeah, it's everything, I think. It really is. And I think if I talk to people now and they might be like, oh, your path has been kind of unique, and it's a very rare thing for someone to like actually come out of nowhere and have success like that. And I would put it down to that, probably. Like, I started getting all these plays and things started picking up, and it got to the point where I was like just taking calls all day from agents and publishers and labels. I was on the phone, and I'm quite ambitious, so I was really into it. Like, it wasn't a thing where I was ignoring people. I was trying to handle it myself, but I was in no position. Like, I don't know how to handle myself on those calls. So I thought I was being clever, but they were probably rinsing me. But but I was determined to not, like, I was never going to dive into anything head first. You know, I had made a decision very early on that I wouldn't sign anything just straight off. But the first thing I got was a manager, and basically the way things were headed, the way streaming was going well, we had put on some shows and they were selling out really quickly. We basically decided, we were like, why would we sign to a label right now? So we took it like probably like almost a year further, to the point that we were doing things that an independent artist like me just couldn't fund. So we needed help. But it meant everything to have taken it so far and be able to show a label that and say, like, you can get in on this, but this isn't nothing. Like, you can't craft this or mold this or change this. Like, it already exists and we need your money, you know?
Yeah. And I guess it goes back to what we were talking about, because what I was really curious to talk to you about today was like how, when you go from literally like two of the most grassroots things I can imagine. One is busking on the side of the road or in the middle of the road in the case of Grafton, and then putting your song by yourself online. These are two of the most like grassroots things I can imagine in music. And you write these very personal, these really wonderful songs. And all of a sudden, millions, billions of people are listening to you, and you have this big machine behind you, and there's arenas that you're playing instead. Like, how do you make sure that doesn't, or does it affect your songwriting, the actual songwriting itself?
A bit. Before I say had the machine and had a career, I probably wrote in a really selfish way and never thought about how a listener might feel. And since then, I probably am a bit more conscious in terms of there's just certain ideas it feels good to touch on, because you know when you play an arena, you're going to sing lyrics that a lot of people can feel, instead of me like just loving The Hobbit and like writing a song about The Hobbit. You know what I mean?
Right, yeah.
So I think I maybe try and write in a bit, probably have tried to be more relatable. I hate the way that makes it sound like I sort of crowbar songs, but like, I just mean I'm probably a bit more conscious of how people are going to feel when they listen to it.
Well, I'm glad you're able to feel a bit, like I can, I'm glad you can feel a bit grounded in all of this. And like, it sounds to me like, I think coming from where you're from, not even being Irish, but like just doing it on your own terms at the beginning allows you to stay pretty grounded. How are you doing with the not being able to play live right now during the pandemic?
Yeah, it's tough. Even just thinking about it, like talking to you about it right now, just thinking about shows we have played, it's fine if it's now, but I would just love to know if there's going to be an end point, like if someone told me you're back on tour next June, I'd be like, fine, I can last till then, but I hate not knowing. I really do.
What's funny about it is a lot of friends of mine have been telling me they thought this would be the time that they would be the most productive, that they would be writing songs all the time, but it's been hard to actually find the motivation to write songs during all this.
Yeah. Yeah, I would agree with that. Bit of both. I have some days that are very fruitful, and then some days where I just don't. I'm probably also, like I said, I'm determined to not just churn out another album for the sake of it. So I've been writing quite a bit without the guitar and the piano, just to find out what actually comes out of my brain, and without the music, you know.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Like writing fully a cappella.
Yeah, and just seeing what words I actually want to say instead of just writing songs. I'm writing to see how I feel. Yeah.
Oh, that's very, very interesting. Yeah, it seems to me like it comes with a certain sense of gratitude when you're able to do things your own way, when you're able to busk, and when you're able to, and then you finally get to these places where you have arenas and you're doing interviews and you're selling all these records. My God, the gratitude when you think about what you would look out at on Grafton Street and what you look out at now in arenas. I'm not surprised that you can't wait to get back up there again.
For sure. But it's important too. You're dead right. And it's important to check yourself sometimes and remember what it was like playing in the street, because it is not that now. And it means an awful lot to me to be able to play to rooms packed with people.
Well, do me a favor now before we go, because I think they're going to come and get me if I talk to you any longer.
Okay.
But do me a favor before we go. You know, I'm always interested when I talk to artists about what songs don't get played on the radio, what songs maybe don't have the same stream counts as the big ones, but that are meaningful to them. So if there's a song we could play of yours that you think maybe could use a little bit more love, what would it be?
Oh, a song of mine?
Yeah, that's right.
Oh, nice. I would pick... what would I pick? I would pick a song called "Dancing Under Red Skies." That's one of my favorites.
What's that? Tell me about it.
That's one of the ones that I wrote years ago. I think that's the oldest song on the album. And it changed. Like, there was an 8-minute version of the song. There was like a 3-minute version. We went back and forth in Toronto. Actually, we were working on it, and we just went back and forth 100 times. And I mean, it's quite a nostalgic song, and I think it's a turning point in the album where it kind of turns from having love into having had love, and I think it's quite nostalgic in that way. So yeah, it's an important one for me.
Well, we'll play it. Lovely to talk to you.
Thank you. Nice one, man.